She walked into the dealership wearing nothing more than a pair of jeans and a plain white t-shirt. Her hair was tied back in a simple ponytail, her sneakers a little scuffed, and her face free of makeup. To most, she looked like just another woman window shopping, someone clearly in the wrong place. The showroom glistened with high-end luxury vehicles. Gleaming Ferraris, Bentleys, and Aston Martins sparkled under the lights like trophies in a museum. But as she stepped inside, something changed. Conversation stopped, eyes turned, and then came the smirk. A sharply dressed salesman approached her, looking her up and down with thinly veiled contempt. "I think you might be in the wrong place," he said, his tone condescending, his smile fake. "These vehicles start at $300,000. Other staff nearby exchanged smug glances. A few customers chuckled. No one said a word in her defense. The woman's cheeks flushed, not with shame, but with the sting of being judged. Still, she said nothing. Without causing a scene, she turned and quietly walked out of the dealership, disappearing into the sunlight. But the very next morning, everything changed. A custom Rolls-Royce Phantom, midnight blue, sleek, and unlike anything most had ever seen, glided to a stop in front of that same dealership. A uniformed chauffeur stepped out, polished shoes shining, and with white-gloved hands, opened the back passenger door. Every eye in the showroom turned to watch. When a man inside stepped out, the air seemed to shift. He was tall, confident, and dressed in a suit that whispered elegance. As he walked toward the glass doors, the salesman who had mocked the woman the day before stared in disbelief. Because the man arriving in the Phantom wasn't just any customer. He was her husband, and he hadn't come to buy a car. He had come to make a statement. Her name was Margaret Collins, though everyone close to her simply called her Maggie. At 35, she carried herself with a kind of quiet confidence that didn't need to be announced. She wasn't flashy, and she didn't crave attention. But behind those simple clothes and calm demeanor was a woman who had built something extraordinary. Years ago, Maggie founded the Collins Foundation for Children with Disabilities. What began as a small effort had grown into a nationally recognized organization, transforming the lives of thousands of children and families. From funding specialized medical equipment to creating inclusive education programs, her work had made a real difference. And still, most people had no idea. She never led with her title, never introduced herself with the name behind the foundation. She believed in humility. Simplicity wasn't just her style, it was her way of staying grounded, connected to the people she served. Despite her financial success and the fortune she shared with her husband, Maggie never stopped dressing the way she always had: jeans, sneakers, and a plain t-shirt. Not to make a statement, but because she saw no reason to impress anyone. That day at the dealership, Maggie wasn't shopping for herself. She was there for her sister, Caroline, who had just won her battle with breast cancer. Caroline had always dreamed of owning a luxury car, something elegant, beautiful, something that felt like a celebration of life. Maggie, who could now afford such a gift without a second thought, had found the perfect one, a sleek, midnight blue coupe that reminded her of her sister's strength and resilience. She wasn't looking for attention. She wasn't there to prove anything. She just wanted to bring joy to someone she loved. But what she got instead was a lesson in how quickly people judge what they don't understand. As Maggie stepped further into the dealership, her eyes landed on the car she had come to see, the midnight blue Azure Coupe. It gleamed under the showroom lights, poised like a work of art. But before she could take a step closer, a man in a sharp navy suit intercepted her. Blake Thompson. He was the dealership's sales manager, famous, at least in his own mind, for being able to spot a serious buyer at a glance. So when he saw Maggie walk in, with her ponytail, plain white t-shirt, and worn-out sneakers, he made up his mind instantly. Not a buyer, just another dreamer wasting time. He offered a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Looking for directions, ma'am?" he asked, his tone dripping with polite condescension. Maggie remained calm, her gaze steady as she pointed. "Actually, I'm interested in that one, the Azure Coupe." Blake's smile tightened. "That's the limited edition Azure Coupe. Only 15 made this year. We show by appointment only." Unbothered, Maggie replied kindly. I'd still love to learn more. Could I see the interior? Before Blake could dismiss her again, a younger salesman, Daniel, stepped up, barely 25, with an oversized suit and an honest smile. I'd be happy to show you, he offered. But Blake cut him off immediately. I'll handle this, he said, stepping in front of Daniel and blocking Maggie's view. Then, without waiting for a response, he gestured toward the exit. Our used cars are 3 blocks east. Might be more in line with what you're looking for. Just then, a couple walked in, Mr. and Mrs. Harrington. Designer clothes, diamond jewelry, polished shoes. Blake's entire energy changed. He lit up like a Christmas tree. Mr. and Mrs. Harrington, what a pleasure. He abandoned Maggie mid-sentence and rushed to greet them. And, to her disbelief, he led them straight to the Azure Coupe. The very same car he just said was appointment only. He opened the door with a flourish, invited Mrs. Harrington to sit inside. Every courtesy extended. Maggie said nothing, but she saw everything, and she remembered. Still, she wasn't ready to leave. She walked back over with quiet confidence and spoke again. I'm interested in this vehicle, she said. It's a birthday gift for my sister. Blake lowered his voice, but not his contempt. Look, I get it. People like to dream. But this car costs more than most houses. I've been patient, but you're interrupting a legitimate sale. People nearby had begun watching. Daniel looked uncomfortable, but Maggie didn't waver. I'm prepared to pay in cash, she said simply. That pushed Blake over the edge. He laughed, loud and sharp. A cash purchase, he repeated, for everyone to hear. This isn't a yard sale. It's a $250,000 vehicle. People who can afford cars like this don't dress like. He waved at her outfit. Maggie's cheeks flushed, not with shame, but with anger. For herself. For everyone who'd ever been treated like they didn't belong. My money's as good as anyone's, she said quietly. Blake leaned in. Let me be clear. You're wasting my time. If you're serious, come back with proof of funds. And dressed appropriately. Otherwise, I'll have to ask you to leave. Silence fell over the showroom. Even the Harringtons looked uncomfortable now. Then another voice cut through the tension. Is there a problem here? It was Richard Mason, the dealership owner. He had stepped out of his office, drawn by the noise. Blake straightened instantly. No problem, sir. Just explaining the policy to this lady. Richard looked Maggie up and down. Miss Margaret Collins, she said, calm as ever. Miss Collins, I'm sure there's been a misunderstanding, he said carefully. These vehicles are exclusive. Understand perfectly, Maggie replied. Your sales manager made that clear. Blake jumped back in. If she's really interested, which I doubt, she can make an appointment. But next time, she should dress appropriately and bring proof of funds. These cars are for a certain class of people. A quiet murmur spread. Someone even stifled a laugh. Maggie looked around at the judging faces. At Blake's smug grin. At Richard's silent acceptance. She didn't lose her cool, but she did feel the sting. I see, she said softly. She turned and walked out, dignity intact, head held high. But as she stepped into the bright sunlight, she pulled out her phone. Calmly, confidently, and with a tiny smile on her lips. This wasn't over. Just outside Boston, the Collins estate stood quietly on 5 acres. Elegant but understated, like the couple who lived there. Inside the home office, Alexander Collins reviewed documents for his latest renewable energy breakthrough. But the moment Maggie walked in, he stopped. He didn't need words. 15 years of marriage had taught him to read her face instantly. What happened, he asked. Maggie sat down. It was educational, she said. Then she told him everything. The smirks, the mockery, the manager who laughed in her face. The way no one stood up for her, except one young salesman. Alexander didn't interrupt, though his expression darkened with every word. It's not about me, she said finally. I can walk away. But what about everyone else who's judged before they can speak? Who never get a chance to prove they belong? Alexander nodded, eyes steady. This was the Maggie he loved, empathetic, unshaken by status. So, he asked, what do you want to do? She thought a moment. Part of me wants to do nothing. Just buy the car somewhere else. But then I think of Daniel, the one person who treated me with kindness. I don't want revenge. I want awareness. Alexander smiled. Then maybe we don't teach them through anger. Maybe we show them something they'll never forget. Maggie raised an eyebrow. Nothing dramatic. No buying the dealership and firing everyone. He laughed. Tempting. But no, I've got something better, something educational. Together, they made a plan, not to shame, but to shift perspectives. Not for show, but for change. And the next day, as Blake walked into the dealership with the same arrogant swagger, repeating his usual lecture about serious buyers, a deep, powerful engine roared outside. Blake turned toward the window, curious. What he saw next would change everything. A custom Rolls-Royce Phantom, extended wheelbase, with a unique midnight blue finish that shimmered as it caught the sunlight. Blake's heart skipped a beat. This wasn't just a high-end car. This was a vehicle worth over $1 million. His pulse quickened, and for a moment, he forgot everything else. The chauffeur, impeccably dressed in a uniform, stepped out and opened the back passenger door with flawless precision. Out stepped a man, tall, composed, exuding authority with every step he took. His tailored suit, his polished shoes, his salt and pepper hair, all of it screamed power and influence. Blake's mind raced, already calculating the potential sale. "Good morning, sir," Blake said, his voice smooth and welcoming as he rushed forward to intercept the man before anyone else could. "Welcome to Boston Luxury Motors. I'm Blake Thompson, the sales manager. It's an absolute pleasure to have you with us today." The man, with a polite but unreadable expression, looked at Blake. His voice was calm, direct. "Alexander Collins," he said, offering a firm handshake. Blake's smile remained, though his mind was starting to work faster now. The name sounded vaguely familiar, but he couldn't quite place it. The Rolls-Royce alone should have been enough to signal that this man was no ordinary customer. Still, Blake pushed ahead with his practiced charm, eager to close the deal. "Mr. Collins, it's truly an honor to have you here," Blake said, his voice thick with professionalism. "I'd be happy to show you our newest arrivals. We just received a limited edition, one of only a few in the world." But Alexander Collins didn't let him finish. He raised a hand, halting Blake mid-sentence. "Actually," Alexander said, his voice unwavering, "I'm here about a specific vehicle. The Azure Coupe, midnight blue." Blake's smile faltered for just a moment. He knew exactly which car Alexander was referring to. The very same car Maggie had been interested in just the day before. The one he had brushed aside, dismissing her as unworthy of its attention. He straightened his tie, tried to regain control. "Excellent choice, sir," Blake said quickly, hoping to regain his footing. "One of only 15 made this year. I'd be happy to show you. It's right over." "I know where it is," Alexander cut him off smoothly. "My wife was here yesterday expressing interest in it." Blake froze. His mind raced as the realization hit him. His eyes darted around, trying to make sense of what was happening. "Your wife?" he repeated, his voice suddenly unsure. "I don't recall. Perhaps one of my colleagues assisted her." Alexander's gaze hardened, and the air between them shifted. "No, Mr. Thompson, you assisted her. Or rather, you refused to assist her. Margaret Collins. She was here yesterday, dressed casually, and you suggested she might be more comfortable looking at used cars." The blood drained from Blake's face. He felt his professional mask crack as Alexander's words sank in. Maggie Collins. That Maggie Collins. The billionaire philanthropist. The woman he had dismissed so easily. He had no idea what to say. Before Blake could respond, the dealership's owner, Richard Mason, approached, sensing the tension. "Is everything all right here?" he asked, eyes shifting between the two men. Blake quickly composed himself. "Yes, sir. No problem. Just explaining our policies. This is a high-end dealership, after all." But Alexander wasn't done. His voice became sharper as he turned to Richard. "The issue isn't just the car. It's how my wife was treated, judged solely by her appearance before she even had a chance to speak." The room fell silent. Staff froze as Blake's confident facade began to crack. "I'm here for the Azure Coupe," Alexander continued. "Midnight blue." Blake jumped in. "Of course, sir. Let me show you." Alexander didn't move. "My wife came yesterday, asking about that exact car." Blake hesitated. I'm not sure I remember." "You do," Alexander said. Margaret Collins. Jeans and a white t-shirt. You told her to check the used car lot. Silence swept the dealership. Blake turned pale. The woman he had dismissed so casually was the wife of a man far more influential than he'd imagined. A young salesman, Daniel, stepped forward. Mrs. Collins was respectful. She clearly asked about the Azure, but she was turned away because of how she looked. Alexander gave Daniel a nod of respect, then turned to Richard. My wife doesn't dress simply because she has to. She chooses humility. Before I met her, she founded the Collins Foundation and raised over $50 million for children with disabilities. His voice remained calm, but carried weight. She doesn't need to prove her worth. She lives with compassion over image, with dignity over ego. Everyone in the room absorbed the truth. Blake stood frozen, realizing his mistake wasn't just a professional error. It was a personal failure. But Alexander wasn't there to humiliate anyone. He turned to Richard with quiet authority. I'm not here to ruin reputations, but I do believe in accountability and growth. Then, he looked directly at Blake. The Collins Foundation is hosting a benefit gala next month. I'd like to invite you, but not as a guest, as a volunteer. We always need hands to help set up, support families, and spend time with the kids. Blake swallowed hard. Yes, sir. If that's what you'd like. I'll be there. Alexander continued. I also recommend bias training for your staff. I can connect you with consultants who specialize in this. Richard nodded. Absolutely. We'll make it a priority. Then Alexander turned to Daniel. I'd like you to handle the purchase of the Azure Coupe. Me? Daniel blinked. You treated my wife with respect when no one else did. That matters more than any sales pitch. Daniel stood taller. Thank you, Mr. Collins. I'd be honored. Alexander gave one last glance around the showroom, a place that had misjudged his wife but now had a chance to grow. Then he headed to finalize the deal, not just for a car, but for a lesson no one would forget. 1 month later, the grand ballroom of the Boston Hotel glowed with soft lights and warmth. The Collins Foundation's gala wasn't just a fundraiser. It was a celebration of resilience and hope. Near the entrance, in a volunteer's uniform and name tag, stood Blake Thompson. No tailored suit, no signature blue tie, just a man transformed, not by obligation, but by experience. He knelt beside a boy in a wheelchair, adjusting the boy's adaptive basketball glove. You've got a better shot than I do, Thomas, he joked. That's because you don't bend your knees, Mr. Blake, the boy replied, grinning. Blake laughed. What began as a task had become something more. Between pushing wheelchairs, handing out water bottles, and watching adaptive sports practices, something inside him had changed. Across the room, Maggie Collins glided through the crowd in a simple blue dress. When she reached Blake, he straightened. Mrs. Collins, he said respectfully. Maggie, she corrected gently. He nodded. Maggie. She glanced at Thomas, who was rolling toward the photo booth. He seems to like you. He's been teaching me basketball. According to him, I'm a disaster. Maggie chuckled, then turned thoughtful. How has the experience been for you? She asked. Blake paused. Humbling and necessary. He met her eyes. I've already apologized officially, but I wanted to say it directly. I'm truly sorry for how I treated you. There's no excuse. You're right, she said. But the question is, did you learn from it? I have, and I'm still learning. He looked around at the families, the kids, the volunteers. This work, it matters, and I want to keep doing it. Maggie nodded. Then the lesson was worth it. Later, Alexander Collins entered the ballroom. Calm, composed, his presence quietly commanding. He eventually reached Maggie and Blake. I've heard you've been quite involved, Alexander said. Helping with adaptive sports, mentoring Daniel. He smiled. About that corporate fleet I mentioned, 7 vehicles. We're still in the market. Blake's eyes widened. I'd like you to handle that deal, Alexander said. Daniel speaks highly of you. The offer hung in the air, a second chance, waiting to be claimed. Blake's voice was quieter than usual, but every word rang with sincerity. I'd be honored, Mr. Collins. Truly honored. Alexander gave a simple nod. Then let's talk next week. In that moment, surrounded by the very people he once would have overlooked, Blake Thompson felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. purpose, not just in business, but in who he was becoming. This time, the opportunity wasn't just about cars. It was about character, and he was ready. Later that night, as the gala wound down and the lights dimmed, Blake stood near the stage, watching Maggie and Alexander Collins speak with families, donors, and children. They weren't flaunting their wealth or power. They were listening, laughing, connecting. No pretense, no performance, just people being present with others who mattered. Blake glanced around the room, at Thomas spinning in his wheelchair with joy, at volunteers packing up gift bags, at Daniel chatting with a young boy about cars, and something inside him settled. He thought back to that day at the dealership, the judgment, the arrogance, the instant assumption he had made about a woman in jeans and a white t-shirt, and how completely wrong he had been. A month ago, Blake murmured to himself, "I judged Maggie Collins by what she wore. I thought I could see someone's worth by their appearance." He paused, eyes still on the crowd. "Now I understand. True value has nothing to do with what you wear or what you own." Just then, Thomas rolled up beside him, grinning from ear to ear after posing for a photo. "You know what, Mr. Blake?" the boy said, completely serious. "You're pretty cool. For a grown-up." Blake let out a laugh, not out of pride, but from something deeper. "Gratitude. Coming from you, Thomas," he said, kneeling beside him. "That might be the best compliment I've ever gotten." And he meant every word. Because sometimes the greatest lessons don't come from boardrooms or business deals, but from the people we almost didn't notice. The ones we judged too quickly. The ones who showed us something better. Have you ever misjudged someone based on how they looked? Or been judged unfairly yourself? If this story touched something in you, share your experience in the comments. You never know who it might help. And remember, true wealth isn't measured by what's in your bank account. It's how you treat people when you think no one important is watching. We'll see you in the next story. Another lesson, another life changed.